righty, let's get started. So, hello everyone and welcome. I really appreciate you joining us from your kitchen table or really wherever you're the most comfortable. We're going to talk about savings today, an issue that's so important for retirement security and our overall financial well-being. And of course, we're particularly concerned that women, minorities, caregivers have some particular challenges when it comes to savings. So we'll get into all that. I'm Susan Neely. I'm president and CEO of the American Council of Life Insurers, and I'm so thrilled to be coming to you through our new community initiative, Protecting Every Future. We're dedicated to promoting everyone having a secure financial future. And today, I have some very special guests who know a lot about this topic, work hard on it, and I want to get right to them. First of all, with us is Congresswoman Gwen Moore. She's a power here in the U.S. Congress, has been representing the great state of Wisconsin for the past 15 years and is a member of the Ways and Means Committee, which if you know anything about Congress, that's where a lot of the real stuff gets done. We also are welcoming Vivian Nava-Schellinger, who's Director of Strategic Partnerships for the National Council on Aging, and Abigail Zapate, who is president of the Board for Latinos for a Secure Retirement, and also with the National Council on Aging. At ACLI, as I think my guests know, we do a lot of thinking about women, minorities, caregivers, and what make it harder for them to achieve a secure financial future, and just what the solutions are: short-term savings, affordable benefits, relief for caregivers. So this is what I want to focus on today to my distinguished guests, and let's get right in. Everybody grab your cup of coffee and your tea or whatever your beverage of choice is. Excellent, and let's dig in. Certainly COVID-19 has had a severe impact on everyone's financial security. There were many issues that plagued us before the pandemic, and I think they've been brought into sharp relief. And of course, we're particularly concerned about women of those that have been laid off. I think 60% are women. So Congressman Moore, what are you hearing and seeing from your constituents? What's the picture look like in your district?
Well, thank you. I mean, this is a tale of two cities. And women are in trouble, and women are in trouble because women who have lost their jobs, like in the restaurant industry, in the hospitality industry, of course, are women. And women who have been forced to stay in the workforce are working for very low wages under onerous conditions in nursing homes and other direct services, essential worker type atmospheres that put them and their children in peril. So women are impacted, and women are impacted, and families are impacted because women no longer, it's a myth that women are not contributing to the household, and sometimes the only income. But certainly, there are many households, even when there are two members in the family, where women are carrying a very big proportion of that burden. But yet, and still, there's still a wealth gap between women and caregivers because of their tendency to be caregivers. There's difference in retirement savings, and it's one of the reasons that I have spent a lot of time, looking at the lifespan of women, childbearing years, a minimum sort of benefit that they ought to be able to receive under Social Security, and given some credit for the years that they spend caretaking. And also look at women who find themselves in those wedge years where they're caring for elders, seniors, parents, and being able to have something like the earned income tax credit, recognize that as work, and to close some of that gap. And of course, there's always the big gap between Black, white, and brown women in income. There's income gaps, and so it's the savings gap is really essential when you think that people just don't have enough money to make it from day to day, and so therefore that sort of inures toward that gap. So there's like 130,000 retirement savings gap between Blacks and whites, and we know that as Black men get locked up here in the state of Wisconsin, Black women get locked out because of the number of evictions and inability to afford basic things such as the market rent. And so I won't fully my way through it by saying more, but I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Abigail, can you say more about that? What are you seeing in terms of particular challenges for certainly women, minorities, and caregivers, such a vital role that in particular women play, but particularly now during the pandemic?
Sure. Thank you so much for that question. And I think Congresswoman Moore brought up a really great point. You know, with the women in our families are really the women that take care of the entire household. One of the things that we've seen is that, unfortunately, for Black and Latina women, and especially within our communities, we've been affected more by the pandemic than most communities. Not only have we been laid off from our jobs, lost wages, have had to dip into our savings, we're still having to go out and continue to work. I'll bring an example. My cousin, she still works in the hospitality space. She works at a Wendy's. She has a family of 2, and she got COVID. And it had to be, my family, the network of our community, to figure out how we were going to get meals to her and to her children, because they were all under the age of 10. And so those are the actual things that are happening in our communities, having to go into our networks to make sure that we're okay, because unfortunately the jobs that are out there, and especially the jobs that folks are having to work during the pandemic, are jobs that aren't giving them more than minimum wage. And even if they are, it's still not enough money for them to buy or rent a 2-bedroom home. It's not enough money for them to get to access health insurance, and let alone even enough money to be able to put into a savings account, and let alone think about retirement. So there's a lot that really comes into this conversation. And I would like to just as a last thing add in that the minimum wage has not changed in over 10 years. I remember being about 17 years old at my job at Taco Bell. And my boss was like, all right, Abby, you're doing a really great job. We're going to give you $7.50 because we think you deserve it. Then the minimum wage went up, and it only went up to $7.25. And what my manager did was like, you know what? You're going to get a raise anyway. It's going to be $7.25. And you know what? That's all that we can give you. And so the fact that minimum wage has not been increased since then, it's really a detriment to what our communities can save, to what our communities can afford, especially during the pandemic.
Well, thank you. It's hard not to talk about the problems without all of you immediately going to solutions, which is what we want to focus on. So Vivian, what are some solutions to these challenges from the standpoint of your organization?
Yes, thank you so much, Susan and ACLI, for having me. It's also an honor to share the panel with Congresswoman Moore. I'll say that by way of marriage, Wisconsin has been a second home to me, originally from Texas, but Wisconsin and Milwaukee is definitely home. But I will say that, our work at the National Council on Aging over the last 70 years has been to preserve protections and supports for older adults through the Older Americans Act and protecting Medicare and Medicaid for older adults and adults with disabilities. But now our work is more critical, more than ever. We did talk about some of the challenges, and we want to talk about some of the solutions. And I think protecting every future, as you said, Susan, you're part of your campaign, is extremely relevant. And what really matters is examining the fact that there are twin pandemics happening. COVID-19 and the racial inequalities that people are seeing every single day. But I do want to highlight that one of those pandemics, certain communities, those most marginalized, Black, Brown, Indigenous communities, have actually had to live their entire lives and generations combating that particular type of pandemic. And so it's critical more than ever to look forward, but we must also understand that these older adults that are battling, how to make ends meet, how to stay healthy, how to stay socially distant, but also culturally connected, because it really is contrary to culture for some of these communities. There are so many things that they're dealing with on a daily basis that we need to make sure that we're talking about those issues that matter most to them and hit close to home. So I want to talk a little bit about older workers. And as we talk about financial plan, we talk about retirement savings, we have to understand, and as an organization, that the pandemic has hit older workers in extremely devastating ways. Susan, older workers are at higher risk for developing COVID-19, as we all know, and they're also overrepresented in positions like custodial services, home healthcare aides, retail, the retail industry, as Congresswoman Moore mentioned. And so they're at a greater risk for catching the virus. And those industries, like retail and hospitality, have actually have had a huge hit by the economic downturn, and they're probably going to endure more cuts. And so when we compound all of those factors, racial inequality, the economic downturn, the fact that COVID-19 has posed such health risks for Black and Brown and Indigenous communities, the fact is that ageism also underlines the older worker issues that we tend to really think about and focus on. And it makes it difficult for older workers to find employment, even in the best times. And so even before the pandemic, older workers would usually accept a salary that was lower than what they were originally being paid, maybe in a career that they had, to find a job and to make ends meet after being potentially laid off. And so I think, there are solutions, and we need to work on what kind of retraining programs are out there for older workers, what kind of retraining programs or funding for these retraining programs are available, what kind of private and public partnerships can be created. And nonprofits have been doing this work for a very long time. And I think it's definitely time for private and corporate interests to say, you know what, we can put our minds together and we can really create these solutions that provide a safe and healthy way, not just for some older workers to get back on their feet, but for all workers to get back on their feet. And the last thing I'll say is, even jumping to specifically focusing on women and the financial impact of the pandemic over a course of a woman's life. And I think that's where we are trying to really think of ways, support systems, new programs, pilots, initiatives. We're being more creative than we ever have before. And I think that's really what you need to ask yourself as an organization, as a policymaker, as an individual living in today's society is, if not now, when? And so we're looking towards the future.
So I couldn't agree more that if there's ever a time for partnerships and joining forces, public, private, NGOs, the time is now. I don't know how the heck we'll work our way through all of this without that. Let's go back to our policymaker, though, because Congresswoman Moore, you talked a little about the earned income tax credit. I know you've been such a champion in this space on so many levels for these issues. Tell us a little more about that and what you think the strategies are going forward.
Well, thank you. I am listening with great interest with what the Department of Age, with the aging advocacy, because that's part of the continuum of care that we have to have for women. As a policymaker, I sought to be on the Committee on Ways and Means, and I was inspired to be that because I was a woman. And and literally, when we say that you can be taxed into poverty, I mean, you can be taxed into poverty. I'm not talking about some poor, struggling entrepreneur out there that just pays such a big burden of tax that they're taxed. No, I'm talking about being so poor that you'll never be able to pull yourself up off your feet. You're literally taxed into poverty by the benefits that you don't receive. as a citizen of the United States, just by virtue of being poor. And that's one reason that I want to be on this committee, because the Earned Income Tax Credit is a place where this discusses Social Security benefits, and of course, the women are more dependent on Social Security benefits than men are. It's a place where if there is any ability to create some equities and to close some of the gaps, pension are dealt with on that committee. And so if there's any place to close those gaps, it's through policy making. So the Earned Income Tax Credit needs to be modernized. I mean, it's a program that has been agreed upon by both Democrats and Republicans. The IRS knows how to run it, but it needs to be more robust. You know, you hear Reverend Dr. Leo Theo Harris and Reverend Dr. William Barber, the co-chairs of the Poor People Campaign, talk about 140 million people who are low wealth. I mean, these are people, they literally get taxed into poverty. You know, they go to work every day, they work hard, they make $16 an hour, and they're not eligible for Medicaid, and they have no health care. You know, they can't afford moderate, perhaps, income housing, and it creates sort of an inequity, and we marginalize. We create no incentive for people to get out of poverty, because they reach a high marginal tax rate. We literally tax them into poverty. This bill would, first of all, probably benefit about 161 million Americans. And, you know, and to the extent that we're not putting pressure on corporations to raise the minimum wage, because the people who have come out of poverty have been people where cities have raised the minimum wage. This would be an opportunity to recognize the real obligation I think we have as citizens to provide some, as the Earned Income Tax Credit does, some incentive for people to work, but recognize single people as young as 18 and not 25. You don't have to have children. To be able to recognize that work up to about $40,000 for a single person, and maybe $80,000 for a couple, and remove the upper age limit for 65. I also think that it's important to encourage people to stay in school. So the Earned Income Tax Credit under my bill would recognize students as workers. It's just stuck on stupid waiting on them to come. To expect people to invest in themselves, go into debt for school, and then not be able to receive any sort of social benefits while they are making those sacrifices to be students. I would also, it's Social Security. My changes in Social Security are based on being a woman. You know, I would have a minimum income. I would give, I would recognize the uncompensated care of women when they are rearing children, and for up to 5 years. Restore the student college benefit. Again, earnings gaps can be explained by the dearth of educational opportunity. You know, and women don't need to have that gap. One thing I forgot to mention about the Earned Income Tax Credit, I would also provide a benefit for caretakers, people, as we discussed earlier, who might be taking care of their parents in the home. I think that these are tools that are already in the toolkit, in the tax toolkit. And as you look into them, you will see how women are disparately advantaged because we have not modernized the Social Security system to recognize their greater dependency on this benefit. You know, because of our child rearing responsibilities as an example. So thank you. I'll yield back.
Well, I think that your you're so right in a statistic that really highlights the impact on women because of pay gaps, because of taking time off to take care of family members, and then not being able to put money into a retirement plan or something like that. I think it's on average $300,000 that women lose because of these things that are just a fact of life. So your strategies, your policy strategies, and your commitment is very, very impressive. Are these things that could have bipartisan support?
Well, I certainly hope that they will. We have not had a real discussion about Social Security. It's a third rail. And so people are scared to open the book on it. But when the book is open, this is really a proper discussion. For all of the discussion around the importance and value of mothering, let's just take, for example, the abortion issue. Say we have no abortions, everybody has children. Do you really want to have a system where practically every single woman will be a parent? Have that count against her in terms of Social Security, in terms of an occupation that we have somehow now mandated. Maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit because everybody who's a parent really enjoys it. I mean, I enjoy being a mother and a grandmother and great-grandmother. But the point of it is that it's an occupation that we should not penalize in terms of earning credits, at least up to a point, that there ought to be some recognition of it for what it is. Mother work is work.
Amen to that. Greatest privilege of my life is being a mother, but there's a lot of work associated. The best work of my life, but that doesn't get around the fact that
And you probably took time off of work at some point, or school. It interrupted work or school, which changed your income trajectory. Something like that really happens. That, or either grandparents retire to help daughters. It falls primarily on women. Whether it's it just falls on women, and it needs to be recognized in the law to create some equities.
All right. So, Vivian, what does the National Council on Aging do next to advance solutions? What's your priority?
Yeah, I think there's just so much on the table. Like you said at the top of the hour, there's so much that we can be and need to be working on. And I think the first step is having and participating in discussions like these. Sometimes the first step is the hardest, and that's really addressing the complexities that are involved and putting the time and the effort and the expertise and the brainstorming and the brain power behind it, thinking about how difficult these policy issues can be, because many of these policies that have been here for a very long time were not structured for the people that they impact the most. It's also remembering that the people who are experiencing the problem are oftentimes the ones closest to the solution to the problem. So we're not including those people who are representative of their communities, local community organizations, senior centers, who are going through such challenging times right now. If we're not representing or creating a forum for them to be involved in these conversations, we'll never get to the heart of these issues. I think also the next kind of iteration of what we want to focus on at the National Council on Aging is around some of those issues like workforce, some of the issues like thinking about financial planning for the long term. What does that actually mean when the long term is uncertain for many people? I think when thinking about women, as we've talked about today, what do these changes mean over time? Because it's not just what's happening to a woman right now. As we all know, retirement planning and retirement security is about what will be the case 50 years from now, 30 years from now, 25 years from now. So we need to start talking about those policies and those issues that are affecting working mothers, especially during COVID, which we know they're doubly impacted. Working a full-time day, whether you have the privilege to work remotely or not, but then also working the rest of your day to caregive for either an aging parent or children. Mid to senior level women, what does an intense pressure to perform, maybe furloughs or layoffs at your own corporation or company or workplace, what does that mean for the way your work is shaped? And what if you have children as well? And then the third thing is Black women. And, really talking about the fact that Black and Brown, Indigenous, Asian American women are more likely to be essential workers. The disproportionate impact on the Black community of COVID-19, 3 to 5 times, more likely to contract the virus. And the fact that, Latinx essential workers are essentially part of the invisible labor workforce. Those are issues that the National Council on Aging hopes to be addressing. And those are conversations that we hope to really advance both at the national level and at people's kitchen tables around the country.
All right, Abigail, we talked about the challenges of aging workers, women, African Americans. What's the next priority for Latinos for a secure retirement?
Sure, thank you for the question. And I think it's threefold, and it could actually be even, different categories. But I think, number one, prioritizing within our community, I think within all communities, that caregivers need to see themselves as policy stakeholders in the conversation. I think for a lot of our communities, especially multicultural communities, we see caregiving as something that we do, something that is innate, something that, is ingrained in our day-to-day, to take care of our children, to take care of our aging parents, to take care of, family members who may be injured, right? But until our communities see themselves as policy stakeholders to know and to hold their leaders accountable and say, hey, I am doing all of this work for free, when they understand that uncompensated care is $1 billion industry, that is a problem. Secondly, I think that part of what we're seeing in our communities right now during the pandemic is that estate planning should also be a priority. I think folks think that just because, they don't have $1 million in savings or a mansion, A, B, C, and D, that they don't have an estate plan, and that's not true. I think especially with when our communities don't see their assets could be taken away if they're not prepared for those conversations once, unfortunately, a relative passes away or someone from the family passes away, which unfortunately we've seen through the pandemic more than ever. And then I think the last thing is really not only prioritizing savings for retirement, but I think really looking into the public and private partnerships that we should be, continuing the conversations with these folks, because folks can't save for retirement if there are other needs within their families that they need to take care of first. Right? So one is the immediate needs. How do we pay for rent? How do we pay for groceries? How do we pay for our Wi-Fi bills, especially right now, right? To do all of our Zoom webinars and for our kids to go to school and to even be able to attend school. Number two, speaking of school, for all of the people, and I think this includes all Americans as a whole, not just younger people or millennials or anything like that. A lot of folks are struggling to pay their student loan debt. And when we're looking at the amount of money that we're supposed to have at retirement, some of that money is equivalent to what people owe in student loans. And that's a problem as well. So I think we also need to make sure that there are sidecar savings to be able to take care of those student loans as well, in addition to legislation to be able to take care of that issue, right? And then in addition to the sidecar savings, then there is also the ability to be able to save for an emergency, and then lastly to be able to save for retirement. I think until we are given those options as a community, as folks across the country, there really won't be an initiative or an incentive to be able to save for retirement, because we know that those first things that I laid out are given the most priority, given the circumstances that we're in right now. So there are a lot of issues that, that as a country we still need to deal with. But I think until we are able to give folks stability, folks won't be able to save for retirement.
This has been such a rich conversation. We've sort of just tapped the tip of the iceberg on the great creative thinking and real solutions that our guests have today. We thank you all for being with us. And I'm just going to emphasize public-private partnerships. I think we're going to all have to work together to get this big agenda done, and we can do it. So we're very glad to have hosted all of you today in this program through our community initiative, Protecting Every Future. For our viewers who'd like to learn more, you can check it all out at everyfuture.org, where you can learn more about financial protection and how to have a secure retirement and a financially secure future. So thank you, all of you, for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you so very, very much.